This is CBC Vancouver News.
And we don't want to be in the place where we have incurred decades of damages into the river.
Why some Indigenous groups in the U.S. are looking to mines in BC's Elk Valley as a cautionary tale on what not to do. Plus, giving hope.
Hopefully, we are all going to be okay.
A close-knit community in Langley is coming together in the aftermath of a devastating fire that resulted in the loss of a popular Mexican restaurant and several other businesses.
Thank you very much for everybody, for our customer, for the community. This is the power we need to go forward.
And
announcements of cuts, layoffs in the forestry sector in particular. That resource sector is a big part of the British Columbia economy.
New numbers from StatsCan show BC's unemployment rate is on the rise, while the national unemployment rate falls for the first time since January. Hello, thanks for joining us. I'm Janella Hamilton. Some Indigenous groups south of the border want more say in the cleanup of an aluminum plant in Montana. They believe contamination from the plant is continuing to leach into the Flathead River, putting fish health at risk, even though it hasn't operated in 15 years. As Corey Bullock reports, the groups are looking to mines in BC's Elk Valley as an example of what not to do when it comes to reducing pollution.
The Confederated Salish and Kootenai tribes south of the border are concerned for their treaty rights as cleanup of an aluminum plant along the Flathead River progresses.
Cyanide, arsenic, we have a collage of really hard pollutants that cause just immense impacts to living animals, humans, everything, especially in the aquatic ecosystem.
He says his people have relied on fish from this river for sustenance for millennia, and he worries that the proposed solution to build a slurry wall won't be good enough. The Columbia Falls Aluminum Company in Montana is owned by Swiss company Glencore, which now owns several mines in BC's Elk Valley, and the cleanup is being overseen by the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency. But these Indigenous groups want more say.
And when we talk about federal agencies, we felt that they didn't consult with us adequately.
He points to BC's Elk Valley, where for decades mines have been polluting waterways in Canada and the U.S. First Nations have long been calling for an independent body to study that contamination. And this year, both countries agreed to the inquiry by forming an international joint commission. Now, McDonald is calling for a similar approach with the aluminum plant.
We want them back off. We want to have a reboot of this thing, and let's look at this in an unbiased manner.
The company, the Environmental Protection Agency, and the state of Montana are all responsible for assessing the existing contamination on the aluminum plant site.
They placed a really heavy emphasis on meeting drinking water quality standards, but not on water quality standards for protection of aquatic life.
She says here in BC, the mining pollution will take years to deal with from an ecological standpoint.
And we don't want to be in the place where we have incurred decades of damages into the river from a poor solution to the aluminum plant cleanup.
In a statement to CBC News, Glencore says it's working with the Environmental Protection Agency on plans to clean up the site, and that the agency will be considering public input as part of that process. Corey Bullock, CBC News, Cranbrook.
People living in Lillooet and the surrounding areas will be without an emergency department this long weekend. Interior Health says because of a lack of available doctors, emergency services will not be open overnight tonight, tomorrow, and Monday between the hours of 7 p.m. and 8 a.m. Those in urgent medical care are being told to go to Royal Inland Hospital in Kamloops after about a 2-hour drive east of Lillooet. A Langley restaurant owner is left picking up the pieces after a massive fire tore through his restaurant last weekend. The blaze also destroyed several other businesses and displaced residents. But as Sohrab Sandhu reports, with growing community support, some of those affected by the destruction say it's giving them hope to move forward.
For almost a decade, Carlos Naranjo says Viva Mexico restaurant was a place where people gathered for an authentic Mexican experience.
Some customers come and say, I'm feeling like, or I am feeling in Cancun or Puerto Vallarta or Acapulco. So that one was the special or the more important reason because we focus in the good atmosphere and entertainment.
But after a massive fire tore through the downtown Langley restaurant just a week ago, the once popular establishment was completely destroyed. The building now demolished.
It had a great atmosphere. There's no question about it.
It's a great place, live music, very good food, great food, yeah.
Owner Baldo Urtuzastegui says it's been hard accepting that his restaurant is gone. But right now, his focus is on supporting more than 20 staff who are now out of work because of the closure.
It was a great bunch of people that worked with me for a long time. To end their jobs suddenly like this and end with no job, it's very difficult. We're setting a fund for them just to help them throughout this crisis, and hopefully we are all going to be okay. But it's difficult, especially for my staff.
Urtuzastegui says it's not yet clear what started the fire, but it could have been sparked by an electrical issue. He and his staff are grateful for the support they have received from the community.
Even businesses that we deal with, people have been patient with us.
We are surprised because too many people call the owners to say they are very sorry and they miss the restaurant.
Urtuzastegui says he's already working on plans to reopen the restaurant. For now, he is on the lookout for a new location, which he hopes to open by next year. Naranjo says they will be back.
Thank you very much for everybody, for our customers, for the community. This is the power we need to go forward.
Saurabh Sandhu, CBC News, Langley.
The BC NDP say a campaign manager received a bomb threat yesterday while working at its Campbell River campaign office. RCMP confirmed it was notified of the threat and, as a precaution, temporarily evacuated staff from the location.
Well, violence has absolutely no place in our politics. We see in other parts of the world where people have to endure violence as part of the democratic process. We don't want that in British Columbia. It's absolutely shameful.
Today, NDP leader David Eby said he doesn't know the intent behind the threat, but confirmed he wasn't at the campaign office yesterday when it happened. Eby was in Surrey and Langley today, where he pledged to complete major transportation projects underway across the Metro Vancouver area, including SkyTrain expansions to UBC and from Surrey to Langley, as well as Highway 1 improvements from Langley to Chilliwack. The BC Conservatives, were also in Surrey, highlighting the growing crisis in food banks and community kitchens across the province.
The need in the community is growing. Whether it is the number of people who are homeless, whether it is the number of people who don't have food, we're seeing this more all across the province. And I just think that, government needs to be able to step up to the plate.
Rustad made the announcement outside the Surrey Urban Missions Welcome Hub, which is set to close its community kitchen on December 12th due to financial strain. Rustad noted the poor grade BC received from Food Banks Canada's poverty report card last fall that showed the use of food banks here has increased by 57% since 2019. Rustad did not put a number on how much will be set aside to better support food organizations, but said it would be a consistent year-round funding. Meanwhile, the BC Greens campaign event was postponed today, but in a press release, the party announced plans to expand support for small businesses and innovators. Canada's unemployment rate is on the decline as this province's jobless rate is going up. That's according to Stats Can's latest labor figures, which shows the economy added 47,000 jobs across the country in September. And as Michelle Morton reports, a new poll is highlighting some British Columbians' economic concerns heading into the provincial election.
Statistics Canada released its labour force survey Friday, and it shows for the first time since January, Canada's unemployment rate dipped, dropping to 6.5% last month. However, in BC, the jobless rate increased from 5.8% in August to 6% in September.
That's not surprising. I mean, just from hearing recently or seeing in the news announcements of cuts, layoffs in the forestry sector in particular. I mean, that resource sector is a big part of the British Columbia economy.
Hickey says, though, sometimes the unemployment numbers do not capture the whole picture.
The unemployment rate adjusts in part when people leave the labor force, when they think, I'm tired of looking for work, the economy is not in a good spot right now, I'll stop looking, I'll maybe look again later. And then if people leave the labor force, then that can cause the unemployment rate to go down when we would expect it to be going up.
I just, transitioned or got a new job 5 months ago. I maybe applied for, say, 100 jobs and get 10 emails back, which was surprising. So I don't know, how actively, all those, job postings would be, actively looking, I guess.
I mean, I've been employed. I have a side job as well that I self-sufficient my funds on. And yeah, I mean, it's not really ever been an issue, but I think it depends on what industry you're going in, what you have for education.
The BC Chamber of Commerce says it commissioned a series of polls to understand British Columbians' perspectives on economic issues heading into the October election. And it says 75% of respondents believe the economy is underperforming.
They're asking for long-term strategies so that they can see not just how the party of the day is going to address immediate concerns, but how they are going to put long-term economic growth and prosperity in place so that future generations also benefit.
The survey shows respondents believe the top sectors to create the greatest economic impact include residential construction, oil and natural gas, and renewable energy. Michelle Morton, CBC News, Vancouver.
Election Day is 1 week away, and Elections BC says Thursday saw the largest advance voting turnout on record for any BC election. And if you still have to cast your ballot, Michelle Gomez has more on what you need to know.
Election Day is coming up, which means it's time to exercise your democratic right to vote. And while we won't tell you who to vote for, we can explain how to vote. The polls will be open from 8 a.m. until 8 p.m. on Saturday, October 19th. And for those who can't make it that day, advance voting runs from October 10th to the 16th. Keep in mind, polls will be closed on Monday the 14th for Thanksgiving.
So we've seen advance voting become an increasingly popular option for voters in British Columbia. It's a convenient option that is available to all eligible voters in BC to cast their ballot before Election Day on October 19th.
You can use the interactive map on the Elections BC site to find your closest location. Voting by mail is also an option, and residents who are currently outside of BC or have other limitations can even vote over the phone. You need to be a Canadian citizen, at least 18 years old, and a BC resident for the past 6 months to vote. If you received a voting card in the mail, you can bring it to make the process faster. But you can still vote without it if you didn't receive one or don't have it with you. You will need to bring identification to prove your identity and residential address. This could be a BC driver's license, a BC services card, or a certificate of Indian status. And there are many other identification options. You can find a full list online. For more details, you can visit elections.bc.ca. Happy voting!
A BC First Nation says at least 55 children died or went missing while attending a residential school near Williams Lake. The figure is contained in an interim report into the St. Joseph's Mission Indian Residential School. The report by the Williams Lake First Nation says no confirmed human remains have been found to date, but adds there is an overwhelming abundance of evidence supporting the legitimacy of the investigation. The report says it received more than 61,000 documents and photos as part of its research. Investigators will finalize ground-penetrating radar work this year and will hold meetings on potential excavation or DNA testing before any decisions on digging up possible graves are made. This coverage can be upsetting and invite painful feelings or memories. If you or someone you care about is looking for support, you can reach out to the National Residential School Crisis Line at 1-866-925-4419. It operates 24 hours and is available for survivors, intergenerational survivors, and their loved ones. Well, it was a stunning sight on a BC beach. The body of a massive male great white shark washed up near Haida Gwaii earlier this week. And the DFO warns as our oceans warm, it could become more common.
Heading up island from where I live to Masset, about a 1-hour drive, and about 20 minutes into it, just driving along the coast, and my eyes always wander over the coastline and out to sea, and part of the beaches were exposed, and on a spit of boulders, I recognized a carcass in the distance. And I got closer, and then I realized it was no whale; it was a shark. And my hopes went up. It was a white because of the size, and sure enough, it was an intact, in beautiful shape, male white shark, great white shark.
So it is not like impossible to see a stranded great white shark in our water, but it's just that it is a rare event. They have a certain range of temperature that they would prefer to live, and when temperature becomes too high or too cold in some cases, the body biology performance and will be affected, and at some point if temperature becomes too hot, they can die.
I was pretty respectful of the thing too. I realized later I didn't touch it except to just put my fingers on the teeth to test the sharpness. I admit I'm a little disappointed the people that followed were, there was people hunting souvenirs and removed the teeth and whatnot, but so is that's what people do, I guess. So.
Cleanup and recovery efforts continue in Florida after Hurricane Milton swept across the state, leaving a trail of destruction. That's next. Stay with us. Recovery efforts continue after the destruction left in the wake of Hurricane Milton. The Category 3 storm swept across the state on Wednesday, spawning several tornadoes. Aaron Collins is on the ground in Florida with the latest.
The storm clouds have passed here in Florida, and as the sun comes out again, recovery efforts are ramping up across the state. In the aftermath of Milton, it's a tale of two coasts in Florida. On the Gulf Coast, where the hurricane made landfall, high winds and storm surge hit hard. But as people returned to the area, a feeling on the ground that things could have been much worse.
We really were expecting to see the whole place just gone, but to come home and also find 4 of the units completely missing their roofs wasn't exactly pleasant either. But at least our home is still standing.
That's a different story on the Atlantic coast. People here spared the worst of Milton's wrath, instead battered by several tornadoes that touched down in the area. This neighborhood, one of a number devastated by tornadoes. 6 people died in this community alone.
It came from over there, right over the house this way, and kept going that way. That's what all those other houses that
straight past here.
Yeah, and I found 3 people dead over there. As soon as it went, I went outside and I started looking for people. And
did you know them? Or?
Yeah, they were my neighbors. We all know each other here. It's a great community.
Across the state, recovery efforts are underway, but many challenges remain. More than 1 million Floridians are still without power. Around the Gulf, where Milton made landfall, there are still gas shortages in places, and even days after the storm has passed, flooding persists and officials are still rescuing some residents.
We're at 6 feet deep. We have some people who believe that it might get as high as 20 feet.
Of course, these recovery efforts come as the state is still trying to address damage caused by Hurricane Helene, which hit Florida just 2 weeks ago. The president, planning to tour the state on Sunday, says help is on the way.
We're going to be going to the Congress. We're going to need a lot of help. We're going to need a lot more money as we identify specifically how much is needed. So I'm just telling everybody now, I don't want to hear that this is going to be the end of it.
Well, it's still unclear how much all this damage will eventually cost. Initial estimates are that the bill could be as high as $50 billion for insurers. Of course, the real toll here is the loss of life. At least 17 people have died in the aftermath of Hurricane Milton. Aaron Collins, CBC News, Fort Pierce, Florida.
Here we have a live shot of downtown Vancouver tonight. I'll have your full forecast after the break.
We're covering the issues that matter to you.
Housing, the education system, climate change,
just general affordability. CBC is your home for provincial election coverage. Don't miss our election night special, October 19th.
People living on BC's inland north coast areas, including Terrace and Kitimat, are being warned of heavy rain and possible flooding this weekend. Environment Canada says the storm will begin today and continue until early Monday. It says the ground in those regions is already near saturation and doesn't have much ability to absorb further rainfall, making flash floods and localized flooding possible. The River Forecast Centre has issued a flood watch for the Kitimat River and Camano River and a high stream flow advisory for areas along the north and central coast. All right, let's take a look now at the forecast for the rest of the province, beginning with a peek at tonight's forecast. We can see that rain along the north and south coast overnight, 3 in Dease Lake, 13 in Bella Coola overnight, and 12 on the island in Tofino. Heading into tomorrow's forecast for Fort St. John, drying right up to an 18 with a mix of sun and clouds. Similar temperatures in both Prince George and Williams Lake. A little warmer in Kamloops and Kelowna with a high of 21 and 20 for tomorrow. And on the island, Victoria, much drier than Tofino with a high of 17. And in Metro Vancouver, our 5-day forecast, a mix of sun and clouds for tomorrow with a high of 17. That rain is going to return for the remainder of the week beginning on Monday with a high of 16. A comet last seen in our skies when Neanderthals walked the Earth might be visible this weekend with the naked eye. Discovered early last year, it likely originated from the Oort cloud, the shell containing billions of icy objects that surrounds our solar system. It will be visible for much of October. If you miss it, it will roll around again in about 80,000 years. That is your late news for Saturday, October 12th. Thanks so much for joining us tonight. For news on the go at any hour, you can always head to our website. We'll see you tomorrow.